All right, well, it's 7 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to our program this evening. The kids are not all right. Couple of housekeeping items. We are going to ask people to keep themselves muted during the program so that everybody can hear. We are recording this and it will be on our YouTube channel for archiving. When we do that, we will edit out the Q&A at the end. So it'll just be the presentation itself. I also wanted to mention a couple of upcoming programs that we have here that may be of interest to folks. We have a couple programs on special needs and disability planning with Shepherd's Elder Law, one on October 5th at our Grandview branch and one on October 20th at our Withers branch in Liberty. But they will be talking about things like powers of attorney, trusts, all the things that you need to think about to set up care and funding in that. You can register by visiting our website at mymcpl.org/events, or you can scan the QR code here on the screen. And then on October 11th, this one is a virtual program. We have Robin Flaherty, who's a herbalist, who is giving a program called More Than a Feeling, Supporting the Body Through Grief. And she will be talking about ways that you can use herbal medicines to help. And that is at 7 p.m. on Zoom. And again, you do need to register to receive that Zoom link. And then on October 5th, something a little lighter, we've got, they're going to put me in the movies, The Beatles on Film. We have a music historian who will be presenting this program. It's October 5th at 7 p.m. on Zoom, and you can register for that as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And before I turn it over to our presenter this evening, again, we'll just ask you to stay muted. You can type questions in chat throughout the program, and I'll ask them at the end, and we'll also have open time at the end for Q&A. There will be a couple of activities that we will be putting links in the chat for you as well as we go throughout the program this evening. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Vladimir.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening to talk about trauma. As I was mentioning earlier, before you guys signed on, this is a very hard conversation, but it is needed and warranted. So I really do appreciate you guys for joining us on this journey. And I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can jump in. Okay. And please let me know if you guys can't see this. So today we're going to talk about the kids are not all right. I wanted to start off by kind of talking a little bit about myself. So I have been a child therapist since 2010. They always tell you to count your years of practicum. So technically since 2008, I have worked in the child welfare world in various settings, such as a residential facility, schools, domestic violence shelters, and I currently work at University Health as a senior project coordinator. I have moved a little bit away from being a child therapist. I'll be honest, I was getting burnt out. It is heavy and hard work, and I was not taking care of myself the way I should. And we will, during this presentation, talk about self-care and really leaning into the things that we need before we open up the space to help out children who are experiencing high levels of pain and hurt. These are my two little superheroes, Olivia and Odin. Olivia is 8 and Odin is turning 5 in November. They are everything that I have worked really hard in this field. It's always interesting to kind of do the work, and then you have your own kids and you're kind of contemplating, how do I not mess these two up? And unlucky for them, both of their parents are therapists, so we still don't know how that's going to shape out. So for today, we are going to learn 3 things. We're going to learn how to identify the impacts of trauma on childhood development. We're going to explore the importance of dignity and worth of children in shaping their self-esteem and view of self. And we're going to learn trauma-informed care and therapeutic interventions to decrease shame and foster healthy environments for our children. Also, again, learn ways to take care of ourselves in the process, because it is hard work. So first, let's talk about the childhood traumatic events. So these are frightening, life-threatening, dangerous events that poses a threat to a child's life or well-being. And I want to hone in on the words of life-threatening and dangerous events. These can initiate strong emotional and physical reactions. And when I say emotional, I'm talking about children can experience fear, helplessness, terror. And when I say physical, we're talking about physiological reactions such as vomiting, bowel movements, and basically heart pounding or anxiety. At the end of this presentation, I should have also mentioned that I am a children's author. I have written and illustrated 3 children's books that are focused on cultural inclusivity and mental health. And this is a page or illustration from one of my books discussing anxiety. So there are different types of trauma. While reading this, I really want to highlight that this is subjective in a sense. For instance, little t's, life-altering emotional distress. Some examples: sudden loss, theft, and etc. Sudden loss. I was once working with a teenage girl, and she was brought into therapy because she had a breakup. Right? That's an emotional distress. However, a sudden loss could be someone who, for me, my surrogate mother passed away last year. That is not a little t to me. That is a big T. However, if we're going by definition, big T is life-threatening experience that are accompanied by powerful fears. So car accidents, serious assaults, school shootings. For my laws, for going by definition, it is considered an emotional distress. However, I view it as a life-altering situation. Complex trauma, prolonged and multiple traumatic events. Some examples are domestic violence, war zones, racial trauma, which we will get into, which the National Child of Traumatic Stress Network has a beautiful definition of what racial trauma is, which I will share with you. And vicarious trauma, which I, as a clinician, have been exposed to numerous times. And these are basically kind of secondary experiences first line workers encompass or experience when they're working with high risk populations. So social workers, firefighters, doctors, police officers. These tend to impact us greatly when we are not talking about it, when we sweep it on the rug and just keep going on. There is a book, and I may throw out a lot of books during this presentation. It's called Trauma Stewardship. And in it, it was written by a ER nurse. And what pulled me or really grabbed me by this book is that during the first few pages, she talked about going on a family trip. And it was a beautiful cliff that they were at. And her husband and children were just enamored by the beauty. However, she looked over the cliff, and the first thing that came to her mind was, I wonder how many people jumped off here. That's vicarious trauma. So what are we looking at when we see this picture? We are seeing a silhouette of a child and the roots underneath his feet, right? This is a very important picture because this highlights what happens for kiddos who are experiencing trauma. So I view myself as a nerd. And when I say this, I'm really big into comic books and all things imaginary. I always reference the term, there's from Transformers, there's more than meets the eye. And that really hones in on children who have been exposed to trauma due to the fact that there are times where they are unable, right, to master skills to regulate those heavy emotions. And so we can see this hurt kid who's upset, who's mad, who's throwing their desk over, and all we're thinking, man, this kid's got problems. Well, we can change the language of, I wonder what's wrong with this kid, to, I wonder what's going on with this child. And that is the roots underneath this child's feet that we really should focus on, the intricate layers, if you will, of a traumatic experiences that are shaping this kid's worldview and experiences. Once we understand those layers, we can kind of really lean in and increase our level of compassion and understanding. So we are going to do an activity. In order to do this, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So right now, if you can, or if you have the power to, you can use a QR code or use your camera to scan the QR code that will send you to the link, or we will put the link in the chat box for you to click on. So I'm going to stop sharing and pull up the, let's see here. So we can see this in real time. Okay. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and type in your response. So what are some examples of traumatic childhood events? Don't all jump in at once. And it's okay if you don't know. The beauty about this presentation is learning what we don't know. Death in the family, natural disasters. And I did look in the chat, and I think I saw someone say rape. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you for participating, and I will pull up presentation. Okay. So some other types of traumatic experiences, and you guys did hit some of them on the nail. So we have physical abuse, neglect, and neglect could be emotional, physical. I've worked with children who all they wanted was attention and interaction from their caregivers. And due to that, of not experiencing that basic need, they would act out. Sexual abuse. And I would obviously, rape would fall into that. Emotional abuse. Witness to domestic violence. system-induced trauma. System-induced trauma is basically children who are incarcerated in a sense, or in residential facilities. As I mentioned earlier, when I first started off my career, I was a residential therapist, and this place is no longer open. But one of my clients, he was institutionalized since the age of 3. He was removed from his father's custody and care due to ongoing physical and emotional abuse. So from the age of 3 to 15 is when I started working with him. This kid only knew residential settings, and he would self-sabotage every time he was placed in a foster home, because for him, what he knew of the world was behind a magnetic door, right? Victim and witness to community violence, war, terrorism, and racial trauma. So as I mentioned earlier, racial trauma is a form of a traumatic experience. It's described as race-based traumatic stressor, refers to mental and emotional injury caused by encounters with racial bias and ethnic discrimination, racism, and hate crime. What I would like for you guys to do as we watch this video, I want you guys to look at this young man, his name is Elijah, and watch his physiological reactions and emotional reactions to what occurs. And the reason he's reacting to this was due to the fact that he watched the George Floyd video. So this is actually an event that occurred after him watching that. So I will stop sharing because I actually have the video pulled up.
Is seen here. 9-year-old Alaya is seen here dribbling a ball in his driveway. Suddenly, he stops what he's doing and moves behind a car, hiding from view as a police officer drives by. A moment later, the patrol car is gone and Alaya goes back to playing basketball. The video was captured by the family's home security camera.
It's shocking. I watched it like 3 times. I couldn't believe what I saw. And I asked why he did what he did. He replied because they killed George Floyd.
Dad Stacey Pierre Lewis was stunned and later shared the video to Instagram, writing, "Why does he feel like he has to hide when he isn't doing anything wrong?" He noted Alaya doesn't see the news and they don't talk negatively about police at home, adding, "I didn't know what and still don't know what to say to him to make it better."
We tried to shelter these kids, right? But it's inevitable. You can't keep them from every screen. You can't keep them from every play date, right? They know what's going on.
Pierre Lewis soon found out his post resonated with more than just a few parents. The clip now has hundreds of thousands of views and has been shared across social media, starting a dialogue about what it's like to raise a Black child today.
It opened up the chance to have these uncomfortable but necessary conversations with our kids.
The video even caught the attention of NBA star LeBron James, who tweeted, "Breaks my heart." A welcome surprise from Alaya's favorite basketball player.
It's crazy, huh?
Pierre Lewis says he was initially hesitant to post about what happened. Now he's hoping his family's experience can help bring people together and make a positive difference.
I think that's very much necessary. And I hope that this ends up on the right side of change.
Stanley Tucci is back in.
Okay. Always fun when you're navigating through screens. And we're here. Okay, can everyone see this correctly? So when in that video, the very first time I saw this, obviously back in 2020, I, as a therapist, immediately saw the impact that this traumatic experience had for this young man, obviously due to the physiological reactions he had when that police cruiser was driving by, the fear, the instant threat level that increased. And I'm glad that they posted this, and I truly hope that this child is receiving services or someone to talk to, because if these experiences are unchecked, they can have, as I mentioned earlier, lifelong impacts and ripple effects for a child's psyche and view of the world. So we are going to talk about the 4 horsemen of trauma. Again, super nerdy here. The first horseman is physical trauma. Second one is behavioral, emotional, and cognitive. So there's an equation I want to teach to you all today. When it comes to behavioral effects of trauma, it is important to understand again, the intricate layers that are accompanied with traumatic experiences. So when a child feels helplessness, hopelessness, powerlessness, worthlessness, plus anger and fear over the things that they cannot control, fear of not knowing what will happen, or even discussing the traumatic encounter, equals negative behaviors. Right? So in my experience, I've heard so many times, and being a school counselor or a residential therapist, of the bad kid, right? And not a lot did I hear of, man, I wonder what's going on with this kid. They mask their pain, and I love this quote by Dr. Nancy Rappaport, but they mask their pain with behaviors that are aggressive or off-putting. They are masters at making sure you do not see them bleed. It makes sense. Of in my field, there's this terminology of hurt people, right? I'm going to hurt you because I'm feeling hurt, and hurting you protects me. It keeps me safe. It's not healthy, but it's what I know because of the world. It's what I've been programmed to understand. We're going to talk about physical effects of trauma. So physical effects are bedwetting. And rule of thumb with bedwetting, I always recommend to parents that I've worked with, if you have a child that's doing this, get it medically ruled out first before we dive into a different area. I always recommend getting that medically ruled out. Decrease reactivity to physical injury, headaches, shortness of breath, and excessive hunger. I've worked with kiddos who, again, not feeling power or in control, will find other means to exude that form of what was taken away. So that could be in terms of overeating or hoarding food. I once worked with a kid, and he was in a foster home, and he was well fed, and he had access to anything he wanted, but yet he would take food and hide it under his bed or under his pillow. And when I asked him, and processing years on, when I asked him why he was doing that, he mentioned to me that he was afraid that this false placement would fail or he would go hungry. Emotional effects of trauma. So children who have experienced complex trauma often have difficulty identifying, expressing, and managing emotions. I'm really big into emotional literacy, and this is impactful or very paramount due to the fact that our kids learn from us, from their teachers, from role models. Children, as Brene Brown, I will reference Brene in later slides, are designed or hardwired for failure. We all are, When we come into this world, we don't have those basic knowledges or skill sets or emotional agility or intelligence. It's taught and it's learned. So with traumatic children, it's imperative for us to teach them those skills, right? How to identify when they're feeling anxious, how to identify when they're feeling mad. One of the things I tend to tell kiddos is that I don't believe in bad kids. I believe in poor decisions. I also believe that anger is a painful state of mind, right? Anger is humanistic. It's instinctual. It's the easiest emotion to get to. However, the challenge is figuring out what is driving that anger. Where is that anger coming from? Now, if we can do that and helping children to understand their emotions, it's a game changer. This is actually a page from one of my books called Just Like a Hero. In this page, Will, who the main character, is looking into a mirror and he's seeing all of these negative thoughts because of his own traumatic experiences, right? He thinks he's ugly. No one loves him. His skin is too dark. He can't read. He has no friends. He's not smart. He's a bad big brother. I can't do anything right. No one would miss me. I'm weak. What's the point in trying? Now, can you imagine being a child and having all of these negative automatic thoughts ruminating in your mind constantly, right? How would you be able to function? I wouldn't be able to, right? There would be a lack of concentration, a lot of blaming, right? Dissociation, inattention, dwelling on trauma, excessive worries of fears. And when we talk about excessive worries of fears, the blaming and even the shaming, it's huge to note that without that insight to one's traumatic experiences, right? Without sitting, naming it, taming it, right? That shame builds. And as Brene Brown says, shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. Guys, I can't tell you how many times I had to work extra hard in the kiddos that I was seeing in therapy to help them to understand that their intrinsic value, their worth. All they saw was just this bad kid that they kept hearing about, but they didn't know how powerful they were, that there was more to them than their trauma. Simply put, the more self-hatred and shame one feels, the more one blames oneself for bad things that happen. The more one has been abused, the more self-hatred and shame one feels, right? Again, going back to what I said earlier, hurt people hurt people. If I don't think that I'm worthy, if I don't think that I'm loved or I matter, then what is the point? And that's why we have to change the rhetoric when we're working with traumatized children of assisting them to see that they're beautiful, they're powerful. Because sometimes it's hard for them to see that for themselves. So long-term responses, according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, children who have been exposed to violence, especially who have not received therapeutic intervention, and as a therapist, I just want to put this out there, therapy is not the end all be all, may increase risk for depression, anxiety, substance use, victimization by an intimate partner, right? Replaying that story, self-destructive or suicidal behaviors. And the reason I say therapy is not the end all be all, there is research out there that talks about it's more than just therapy. It's the environment that they're in, the other or adults or role models in their lives. I've worked with kids who either enact, because of their trauma, they enact in maladaptive or adaptive behaviors. And the maladaptive is the self-cutting or hurting others. The adaptive is focusing on other things. This bad thing has happened to me, but because of these individuals in my life, building me up, helping me to see more, I can focus on different things. So I know we talked a lot about trauma. Now we are going to talk about resiliency. We talked about the hurt? Let's talk about some interventions, things that we can use to help our children and ourselves. I love this quote from the Gottman Institute. Remember, the kids who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways. All behavior has an underlying message. I want you guys to think about that image from early on of that child, the silhouette of the child, and the roots that were stemming from his foot, right? Those are the underlying traumas that we're not seeing. And because of the language that they do not have to express themselves, they're going to ask for things in the way that we don't want. So before we work with traumatized children, it is imperative as caregivers, social workers, therapists, that we take care of ourselves first. Because again, this work is difficult. One thing that we are doing at my agency, which I'm really proud of, is that we are creating self-care plans. I don't know if you guys can see this really, but it's basically 3 things you can do. So before your day starts, in the middle of a crisis, and after the crisis. So for me, these are my kind of activities. So taking a 30-minute walk, grabbing lunch. I know that sounds silly, but there are times when the days are heavy and I forget to eat. Talk to your supervisor. Spend time with supportive people in your life. And I was going to make this into an activity, but since there's just 3 of us, I was hoping, we have some time, if you guys would like to come off mute, I was hoping you guys can kind of share maybe some helpful or wellness things that you have done to kind of make heavy days not feel so heavy.
Sure, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mindfulness apps are really powerful. And one of the things that has helped me the most is, I call it just listening to the air. But I even will set a timer for like 10 minutes and then I just listen to the air. And I mean, clearly you hear other sounds, but it's a great way of resetting for me.
That's very impressive. So you only focus on specific sounds you hear when you listen to the air, or
the absence of sound. I'm just listening for and trying to feel the air blanket me. And so it means I have to get really still. So whether I'm sitting in my car or sitting in the front room on a couch, I literally set a timer for like 10 minutes and then I just try to listen to quiet. And there'll be like a dog barking or there whatever. I'm just literally listening for the sound of air, and it's been very soothing.
That is, I tip my hat to you. I can only last 60 seconds and sitting still. So that's, when I hear that, I'm just, yeah, I applaud you. That's impressive.
Thank you.
Jordan, or Gordon, I hate to call your name, since I feel like we're in like in a small little personal class, and you don't have to share, but if you want to. Pull up.
I'll say that, like you, the walking, getting away from my desk and being able to just go out and walk around for 5 minutes or something.
It is so neat. There are times where I'm so inundated in what I'm doing that I forget how nice it is outside. And when I go for a walk, I'm like, oh my gosh, the air smells great. Okay, let's jump back in. Okay, so again, if you can, I don't know what you all do for a living, but if you can, again, if you have a badge, I would create yourself, it's called a safety plan, but I would say your self-care plan, and have it on your badge. That way your supervisor can see it, your fellow coworkers can see it, but it's a great way to really practice what you need in the moment. Another idea I wanted to present to everyone when we're taking care of little ones or kiddos are called what we call tenderness kits. So at my job, they were called mental health kits, and they're little baggies that have different items inside of it. So the baggie that was provided to me had a cotton ball, a Kleenex card, a mint card, a mint, and each one represented something. So for example, the balloon, remain flexible, use your assertive communication to express your needs during hard times, breathe in, relaxation, blow out frustration. So these tenderness kits can be self-designed by you, and picking little things around the house that can jog your memory of things that you can do when you're feeling stressed out. This is a mood monitor. Now, I created this a long time ago, and it's currently located in our kitchen, actually in our doorway to our house. My 8-year-old uses it, and that's our way of checking in with her after, when she comes home from school. But mood monitors are a great way to increase emotional literacy when it comes with children, and specifically children who have experienced trauma. What this is basically different levels of emojis. And I would have a bucket with all emojis inside. And basically, whenever I would have a session, a kiddo would come in, and before we even started talking about therapy or whatever the activity or intervention was for that session, I would have them pick out their feelings for that week. Now, here's the thing, guys. We all know we can have more than one feeling. And so I would tell my kiddos to pick out as many feelings as they needed and to rank it. And what this helped was to help them to map out emotions, but also, right, give them examples to tie to that emotion, which had a ripple effect of, oh, wait, when someone is calling me this mean name, it makes me feel mad. What can I do? Dan Siegel is a fantastic psychiatrist, and he developed what he calls flipping your lid. And it's a hand model of the brain, and it focuses on what happens when a kiddo becomes stressed, when we have high cortisol, right? It's a beautiful 2-minute video that I tend to show to my teenagers and even parents. And I want to share this with you too, because it's a great way to understand what goes on under the lid. Let's see if I can make this work. All right, I am rocking it today with technology. Here we go.
Brain science and apply. One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
Go. It's called Flipping Your Lid, the name of the Dan Siegel video. So that is a video I really like to share with families, and actually experimented with our daughter when she was 6, to the point now she's 8, where when she becomes frustrated, she'll look at us and she'll do one of these where she's lifting it and like will directly look at our eyes, and we all know we just need a break. And we'll tell her, go to your room, take a few seconds, or my wife and I will remove ourselves, but afterwards we'll come back and kind of talk about what happened, because repair is huge in terms of if a kiddo is escalating. And we're going to talk about the stress model, which highlights the window of tolerance, if you will, right? Like, when can we intervene? When should we not intervene? And when should we follow up after an incident has occurred? So kids will use the best tool in their coping backpack to respond. If a kiddo is not responding well to something, right, that means that they may not have the tools in their toolkit to best support them in that manner, right? That also means that if we are working with them to develop healthy coping skills, it has to be a routine practice. It shouldn't be something to where once they're escalated, we are telling them, hey, remember that first time I told you to count to 5 on your fingers? No, when we do that, we have to practice that when they're at their baseline. In our field, or in my social work field, we always talk about planting the seed, right? So connecting with a child comes first before correcting a behavior. We are big on connection before correction, which makes sense. When you have a rapport with someone, this can even be a colleague, right? When you have a rapport with someone, an alliance, then when they use something, it's easier to talk about that because you have that building block of connection already established. So how do we connect? Eye contact is huge. We also talk about get down on their levels and make eye contact with a child. Let them know they're safe. Breathe with me. You can handle this. Mirror neurons. So this is huge. As caregivers, providers, teachers, whatever our professions are, we are role models for the kids that we work with, or our children. So if we're feeling frustrated and upset and we are basically not regulating ourselves, then kids see that. And that's a kind of a message of, this is how I navigate through the world. So we have to be mindful of that. And calm eyes and gentle voice. Playfulness is another big thing we can do to help children who are experiencing traumatic experiences. This is a game called the 3-2-1 game. So basically you would ask a child to identify three objects above eye level, 3 sounds they can hear, 3 things they can touch, 2 things they can see, hear, or touch, and 1 thing they can see, hear, and touch. Another big thing we want to talk about is the impact of culture. So this is paramount due to the fact that this can impact how we intervene or interact with a child who has experienced traumatic events. So in my field, we talk about, this is basically called the social systems theory, and an individual impacts the family impacts the community, and the community impacts the broader society as a whole. So in my time of being a therapist, whenever I would have a child in therapy, I would not pinpoint all the change needing to occur with that child. I would involve the family. So if you're a teacher and you know you have a kiddo in your class and this kiddo is acting up, and you're changing your perspective of, okay, there's more going on to this kid than meets the eye, bring in the family. They are going to be your biggest advocates, your biggest supporters, because it does take a village. So we're going to briefly talk about the stress model, and this is huge in understanding what we can do and when we can do it in order to help kiddos who are experiencing high levels of hurt. So as I mentioned earlier, at baseline, when a kid is regulated, that is the best time to teach them new skills on an ongoing basis, right? Trigger stage is when we are noticing something small that's agitating that child. Now, for us, whenever our 8-year-old comes home and she doesn't want to engage at all in the mood monitor, we know something's going on. Or when she's yelling at her 5 or 4-year-old little brother unnecessary, just for no reason, we know she's triggered. Something is happening. So there is a window of tolerance, right? It's between trigger and escalation. So in that window of tolerance, my wife and I, we know we need to sit down have a conversation, use I messages or I statements. I see that you're not feeling, or I see that you're sounding upset. I wonder what's going on. How can we help you? How was your day? Right? Between escalation and outbursts, it's where you want to just ensure safety. I highly recommend at this point, we are not trying to tell a kid, remember your breathing. This is a point where if they're hitting that wall of just wanting to be destructive, then where can they do that? Can they go to their room and scream in their pillows? Do they have foam gloves that they can hit the wall with? Or one intervention I taught a kid a long time ago was to take wet Kleenexes and throw it at the wall. You're releasing anger, but you're not hurting anything in the process. And also you have to clean up afterwards, right? And then the recovery stage of it all. So this is where the behavior, that the aggression has come down, and that child is in a state of kind of returning back to baseline, right? Where we can have that reparative conversation of, hey, this happened. What can we do different? Help me help you. Okay, we're gonna do another, be mindful of our time here, another activity. So what are some behavioral strategies? So in our conversations, what are some things you think would help a child who's struggling so intensively with their emotions? And I listed some examples here, so drawing, reading, but I want to know, what are some activities you think will be beneficial? Let's pull up fancy. Okay, so yeah, what are some behavioral strategies? What are some interventions we can utilize to help kiddos who are struggling with some big hurt feelings? Breathing deeply. I'm a fan of that. Actually, I'll even ask this question. What are some strategies you have implemented for yourself when you were feeling stressed or vexed? And I know we talked about earlier about the mindfulness of listening to sounds, but distractions, yeah. Singing is an awesome one. Stress balls. upbeat music. Sensory bin, yes, I love, man, I am such a kinetic person. I love stress balls or those like magnetic pins. These are really good suggestions. All right, I'm gonna go back, so stop sharing. So when we're talking about behavior strategies, one of the key things too that we can focus on is routine. Now, routine is huge. I'm not a big routine person, but I do like to know what's expected. And for a child who has experienced levels of uncertainty and unpredictability, providing consistency helps regulate some of those heavy emotions. So leisure activities, right? So for a child who's experienced trauma and they were removed from their home and placed in the foster care system, returning them back to some of the things that they used to do before they were removed from the home is paramount. So if that kid used to play sports, baseball, basketball, soccer, and they were ripped from their home due to neglect or abuse, let's find a way to put them back in those activities that they were used to. Morning routines, right? Again, go back to consistency, waking up, hygiene, breakfast. For our 4-year-old, if we do not give that boy muffins in the morning, he is not getting on his bus. It is unbelievable. Bedtime routine, right? Again, being consistent with whether that's story time, baths. These are building blocks to help traumatic kids in general, to feel safe and have a level of reassurance. We are not, for the sake of time, going to do this practice scenario, so we're going to skip that. I wanted to introduce you all to my 3 books. My mission statement was basically creating inclusive literature to increase resiliency and a sense of worth in children. So my first book, Just Like a Hero, is by a young boy named Will, who is struggling with depression and poor view of self. This book actually was created because I was working with a young Black kid who was brought to me because he was being bullied at school because of his skin color. And he thought, due to his father being a plumber, he thought if he could take sandpaper, right, he can basically lessen or brighten his skin, right? He thought he can rub it off. So in working with him, I really wanted to find a book that talked about the beauty of being Black, beauty of being a Black man, and also being a hero. Google failed me, so I decided to become my own agent of change, and I created Just Like a Hero. And these are just different scenes from the book. So sometimes Will thinks about things that make him feel really mad. He shows this big feeling by being mean and angry to his friend Carrie. We also, in all of my books, we have activities that I do with kids whenever I do author visits. So I'll have kiddos during this section place one hand on their stomach, right? And take a deep breath in, hold it for a few seconds, and a slow breath out. And at the end of the book, and we do see his trajectory of being a hero, he looks back in that mirror, and because of all of the things he's learned along the way, he realized all this time that he is a powerful human, that his skin is beautiful, that he's smart, he's important, he's brave. It Will Be Okay is about a young Latina girl named Alma who's dealing with anxiety, low self-esteem, bullying, and sleep disturbances. And in this scene, she would like to do those things again, but certain feelings are getting in her way. And this is her fear monster. So I basically created a illustration to kind of show young children what fear could look like in a sense and how to tackle that. And the power of therapy. When I was a first newbie in this field, there was a lot of stigma that wrapped around children being in therapy that I wanted to destigmatize. And the process does take a while. And my third book, Making Mistakes, is about a young Palestinian boy named Zaid who's dealing with ADHD. And in this book, what's hard for Zaid is that he cannot slow down, right? He has poor attention, and he gets blamed a lot and shamed because his mind is moving faster than the world, in a sense. If we have more time, I would read the illustrations. So last slide here, Kid President. I don't know if you guys are came across Kid President, but I used to love these YouTube videos. We need to help all kids feel safe. So as adults, providers, caregivers, our fundamental job when we are interacting with a child that has experienced traumatic events, we have the power to help shape those young individuals by being compassionate and kind and understanding, and really focusing on those unnoticed roots, layers that are underneath them that we can't see, and sometimes they cannot see for themselves. Last nerdy thing here, from Stanley, that person who helps others simply because it should or must be done, and because it is the right thing to do, is indeed, without a doubt, a real superhero. So that's all I have for us today. I'm gonna stop screen sharing here. And I do apologize. I was hoping to stop at 7:45 so we can answer questions. Sorry, I did not respond. I am not savvy with Zoom. This was a beneficial talk. Oh, thank you. Do we have any questions?
I do.
Yeah.
First of all, this is one of the best presentations I've seen for any
thank you.
library, because the knowledge is so practical and just so well done. Just so important. So I hope you present this many more times for the library.
Thank you very much.
And
it's hard to present at 7 o'clock at night. So I had to like boast up all the energy I can like muster.
Well, but I just, and I know we get to write a little review at the end, and I'm definitely going to be writing, he needs to come back lots, and because it's really important with the rates of suicide that are increasing, children especially. I just would love to know, and I don't know about Gordon, but how did you find yourself in this path? How did you decide on what your degree was? And
my why?
Yeah. Well, and yes, and you're like, literally, where did you go to school? What was your focus? How did you end up working with children? All
right. I will condense that into 60 seconds or less, so I'll do my best.
Right.
So I actually, so I went to UMKC. I was a pre-dental student. I thought I wanted to be a dentist. And then I actually found out the suicide rates for dentists. And I also flunked out of organic chemistry. Like, I didn't flunk out. I did not obtain a B. So in my own, I should have started off by saying that I struggle with my own mental health. Like Will, I struggle with anxiety and depression. And a lot of that stemmed from my inability to pass those courses back then. But I had to take a elective, and I took a sociology class, which kind of spearheaded me into the direction of this field. I love the idea of how people interact with their environment and how their environment impacts them, right? It can alter them. It was mind-blowing to me. And I realized in my last year of college that I wanted to pursue a master's, and I took an intro to social work class that was led by Greg Andres. And he was this guy who came in with this Hawaiian shirt, cargo shorts, a Green Lantern belts, flip-flops. And I was like, he's a professional? And he was talking about how he's a child therapist and he works for kids all day. And I, just listening to him and the tenets of social work, I told myself, that's what I want to do. I want to be someone that helps children when they're at their worst. Because when I was younger and I was dealing with my own levels of bullying, I didn't have anyone. I didn't even know I could talk to my parents about it. Sorry,
Right.
that was more than 60 seconds.
Are you in the Kansas City region?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And do you have your own practice, or are you with another group?
I do not practice anymore. I work at University Health, Behavioral Health. It's a hospital here in the metropolitan area.
Well, your clients are very fortunate.
Why, thank you.
Because of that comment, I went ahead and I posted the link to the survey for everyone, and I will also email it out. And like I said, this will be going on our YouTube channel. So if you know of other people who might be interested, it usually takes a couple days for them to do the editing and get it up there, but it will be available as well.
And I did add my website in the chat just in case you guys want to contact me or see other things that I've been doing in the community.
Any other questions before we wrap up for the evening?
Again, just thank you. It was absolutely fantastic. And do you go by Vladimir?
Yes, yeah, or Vlad, whatever's easier on the tongue.
Right. So I think it would be super awesome if you did a TEDx talk.
Thank you. Wow.
So
Me too.
So I want to contact you later. I'll go to your website.
Okay.
And just share a couple of things. So yeah.
Well, that'll be great. Happy to hear from you.
Yeah, I think people need to hear you on a worldwide stage. So
Thank you.
okay. Anyways, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you, Vladimir, for this wonderful presentation. I know I learned a lot from it. And so again, we hope you'll fill out the survey. If you have suggestions for other topics you'd like to see programs on, we want to hear those as well. That's how we get some of our best ideas. And we hope you'll join us again in the future. Have a great evening, everybody.
Take care, everyone.